Hello, I'm City Manager Matt Morton. Welcome to our virtual town hall meeting. And today's topic is solid waste collection. Joining us today is Cynthia Sweers, our Director of Citizen Engagement. Cynthia has been with the City of Palm Coast for 17 years. And during that time, she has been managing our solid waste contract, at least for the past 5 years. And she oversees the critical call center and the front desk for the city. So anytime you call customer service or have an engagement with the city, chances are Cynthia is behind that. Also joining us today is Allison Trulock from New Gen Strategies and Solutions, LLC. Allison has over 23 years of solid waste experience. New Gen Strategies is a 47-person management consulting firm that works with municipalities regarding strategic and financial planning, procurements, cost of services, rates, and operational issues in the solid waste sphere. As most of you know, as our residents and citizens, this is an issue that touches you weekly. Every week, we look forward to getting our garbage collected and having it taken away. It's part of the quality of life of living in a city, and particularly in the city of Palm Coast. So the order for today, and again, thank you for joining us. It's sort of an outline of what we hope to cover today, is a discussion of what the current contract covers, and leading that discussion will be Cynthia Sweers. A discussion of the types of collection and collection options that may be available to us in a future contract. Allison Trulock will be covering that. And additionally, she'll be discussing a little bit about industry changes and what's driving changes in solid waste and solid waste collection. And then finally, we're going to do our Q&A and answer questions from you, our residents, that you've asked us or will ask us in regards to solid waste collection opportunities and what this new contract proposal could look like. So with that, Cynthia, would you like to discuss what the current contract covers and bring our residents up to speed on where we're at?
Yes, so currently every residential Palm Coast resident is getting charged a monthly charge of $20.36. That fee has been in place since 2017. That includes twice a week garbage pickup, once a week recycling, once a week yard debris pickup, and once a week white goods in bulk. One of the things that a lot of people have a misperception on is that they think that this fee is on their taxes. It is not. It's been with the city quite a few years. I actually even did some research to kind of figure out when did it start. And since 2003, when the city was incorporated, we've had that contract. Prior to the city putting out on their utility bill, it was actually the hauler provided an invoice. It started out actually monthly and went quarterly. Now, when we went out to bid, when the city took over, we got a better rate by us taking over that billing and that customer service internally. So a lot of people don't realize that the history of the billing as far as where did it start with the city. So I think it's important that everybody realizes that it's not on your taxes, it's actually on your utility bill. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it off to Allison.
Thank you, Cynthia. And I want to spend a few minutes talking about the different collection styles for garbage and recycling. There's 3 basic styles. There's manual, there's semi-automated, and there's automated collection. And I'll start with manual collection, which is the style of service that's currently provided in Palm Coast. And if you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, the photograph there is what we refer to as a rear loader or a rear load truck. So with manual collection, the residents supply their own garbage containers, their own cans or bags, and then the city provides recycling bins for the recyclables. And you can see in that image that the collector is the one who actually puts the garbage can, tips it into the back of the truck, hence the name rear loader. So with rear load collection or manual collection, you have to have a driver, and then you have either one or maybe 2 different collectors. And the collector is the one that's doing the lifting for the garbage to go into the back of the truck. And then the recycling is lifted into the back of a separate truck for recycling collection. There's also semi-automated collection. And so with semi-automated, this is where I want to introduce the notion of city-provided wheeled containers or carts. So if you look at the image on the top right-hand side of the screen, you can see the images of 3 different size carts. So carts usually do come in 3 basic sizes. The specific size depends on who's manufacturing the cart, but typically the largest size cart is a 95 or a 96 gallon cart, and that can hold up to 7 kitchen size bags of garbage. The medium size is usually 64, 65 gallons, and that can hold 4 or 5 bags of garbage. And then the smallest size container, for some manufacturers, it's a 32 or a 35-gallon cart. Some manufacturers make a 45-gallon cart, but that's typically the smallest of the 3 different cart sizes. Another thing to note with these city-provided wheeled containers, also known as carts, is they can come in a variety of colors. So it's common to have one color cart for garbage and a different color cart for recycling. And in some communities, the residents can select which size they want, but in most communities, the city determines what size cart is going to be issued for garbage and what size cart would be issued for recycling. So there's 2 different ways that you can pick up these carts. One is semi-automated, the other is automated. With semi-automated collection, if you can see in the picture down on the bottom right-hand side of the screen, it's still a rear loader like what we just talked about for manual collection, but there's something called a tipper that's put on the back of the truck. And so the collector wheels the cart over to the tipper, and the tipper is what actually lifts the container into the back of the truck. So again, with these rear loaders with tippers, you've got one driver and at least one, sometimes 2 collectors. The difference here is that the tipper itself is doing the heavy lifting into the back of the truck. Another thing to note on these carts or city-provided wheeled containers is you can see the very large wheels at the bottom, and there's a handle on the backside. There's also a little toe kick, so you can step on the back of the cart and tip it, and they're actually very easy to maneuver, even the 96-gallon container, to get it down to the curb. And then we've also got automated collection. So again, when you have carts or city-provided wheeled containers, it's either semi-automated or automated collection. So if you can see the images on the right-hand side of the screen, the top picture there is called an automated side loader. And so you can see the arm that comes out of the side of the truck and lifts up the cart, tips it into the back of the truck, and then sets the cart back down where it picked it up. The bottom picture is what's called a Corrado can front loader. So you can see almost like a little dumpster on the front of the truck, but the arm comes off of that little dumpster, tips the cart into the back of the truck, and then sets the cart back down where they picked it up. And after that little dumpster on the front gets full enough, then the truck actually lifts the dumpster up over the truck and dumps it into the back of the truck. Now you'll notice there is a recycling bin in the bottom of that Corrado can picture. These automated collection vehicles don't pick up bins. That just happens to be in the picture, but they are used to pick up carts. And the main difference with automated collection is that you just need a driver. You no longer need collectors on the truck because the truck itself does the collection and does the heavy lifting. I want to spend just a few minutes talking about recycling market challenges and how they're impacting collection contracts. There have been a lot of changes in the last few years in recycling. I want to first give you a bit of an overview of what happens once you set your recyclables at the curb. So you put them out at the curb, the hauler collects them in their vehicles, takes the recyclables to a processor, and then the processor sorts all those materials back out and then bales up individual types of materials. Once those items are baled up, then they're ready to go to the market. So when we talk about recycling markets, we're talking about where those bales of recyclables actually get sold. Generally speaking, in the United States, we collect about 70 million tons of recyclables in a year. What had been true up through 2016 is that we were exporting about 37 million tons of recyclables. And of those 37 million tons, China was purchasing about 43%. So nearly half of everything that we were exporting was being purchased by China. Back in July of 2017, China notified the World Trade Organization of its intention to prohibit some items and then put some very stringent contamination requirements on other items. And so beginning July 1st of 2018, that's what happened. So one of our biggest purchasers of our recycled materials was no longer purchasing it. So the net effect of that is that there was more supply, and when there's more supply, price goes down, and when price goes down, the revenue coming from the recyclables goes down. And most city and county recycling programs rely on some of that revenue from the recyclables to offset the cost of the recycling program. So since the beginning of 2018, there have been some real challenges in the industry to keep these recycling programs funded, and the cost has gone up for these recycling programs. I want to share a line graph about recycling market volatility. And so as you look at this line graph, what's really tells the story, it has a few different common material types that get baled and sold. But if you look at the right-hand side of the line graph, you'll see that prices were pretty good in 2016. You can see what happened as 2018, the purchasing of our scrap, or the exporting of our scrap, was impacted by China. The good news is in 2020, those prices did start to recover. So they're nowhere near where they had been, but at least this line graph is moving in the right direction. So there is always market volatility with these recycling markets, but what we've gone through over the last few years has been very difficult for most communities. Pretty much every community in the US has had to deal with this. So what that has led to is some state legislative changes that do impact collection contracts. So in the last legislative session, there was, it's referred to as Florida House Bill 73 that passed. And so it took effect October 1st of 2020. And the new law changes affect processors as well. But because we're talking about a collection contract here, I'll focus on the impacts to local governments in those collection contracts. So what this new law requires is that in those contracts between communities and haulers, they've got to address contamination. And contamination has been an issue in recyclables for a long time, but with these recent changes, it's become even more of an issue, because anytime there's contamination in the recycling, that ends up costing more money, because once the processor sorts out the contaminants, then they've got to haul it off and dispose of it. So it actually adds cost to have contamination in the recycling containers. So what the state law is now requiring is that every one of these contracts needs to first define contaminated recyclable materials. And then the contract needs to cover what the strategies are going to be to try to mitigate the contamination in the recyclables. And I envision that this would be in the form of allowing the hauler to leave notices on recycling containers if there's too much contamination in it. There will also be additional efforts for education and outreach so that the public understands what really belongs in the recycling container and what doesn't. There's something that often happens in everyone's mind where we call it wish cycling, where you've got an item that you just believe should be recycled. So even if it isn't actually in your curbside program, you may put it in your container. So your heart may be in the right place, but it actually does more harm than good in the long run with the recycling process. So the efforts in this next contract will focus on making sure that residents are educated about what's actually in the curbside recycling program, and then also having some means of tagging those containers to continue to educate the residents if they're leaving materials in their containers that shouldn't be in there. So I envision that's kind of how we will work it in. I don't think this will go to issuing fines or anything like that, but we do need to do a better job of educating residents to make sure that we're not putting contamination into those recycling containers. And it's good for everybody. It allows the program to be more cost effective if we can minimize the contamination, but we also now need to follow state law. So we'll make sure that's a part of the next contract. So I hope those overviews of style of collection and what's been happening in the recycling markets and what state legislation has changed has been helpful. Hopefully all of you will go take the customer survey. I think we've already had over 9,000 responses, which is a great response rate, but we'd love to get that up even more. The survey will be available through March 31st. And I think you'll see as you go through that survey, some of the questions that we have in there. I think our explanations here today about style and what's happening in recycling will help you understand why we put some of those questions in there. But again, I just want to encourage everyone to go online and take the solid waste survey, and you've got until March 31st to do it. With that, I will hand it back over to Mr. Morton.
All right, so once again, I want to thank you for making time to join us today on this virtual town hall regarding solid waste. Really appreciate our residents' time. And we do have quite a few questions that we're hoping to cover today. So I'll read those questions and then direct, hopefully who I think staff that can answer, but we're going to do it kind of in a team town hall style. So we'll see. We'll start with the first question that we've received from a resident. Can we move to 1 day per week trash collection? The trash receptacles seem to be large enough to support once weekly trash pickup. And Cynthia, can you take that question for us?
Yeah, so Allison kind of hit the different styles of the different trash cans and how big they can be. One of the things right now that we're really keen on is just kind of getting information from the residents with this survey. We're not changing anything yet. It's one of those things we just want to kind of put some feelers out there, figuring out if it's something citizens would consider. So right now, there's no final decisions. We're waiting for all of the surveys to come back, and what we'll be doing is presenting some options to council and decide from there what will go out to bid with our new contract.
Great. The next few questions are asked separately, but they're related, Cynthia. So I'll ask them together. We received a question from residents. Under its current contract with Waste Pro, does the city have any recourse, such as penalties, etc., for lack of service? And then what type of investigations are being done to assure that Waste Pro is consistently filling their duties that we pay for?
So these are good questions, and a lot of residents don't see the back end. But we have in our citizen engagement department, we have really strived to try to make sure that you're getting that service from them. You're paying for it. We want to make sure they're providing that service. So one of the things that the contract allows us to do is what's called liquidated damages, and they're other known as violations. So there's a list of them in our contract, and basically what we do is we monitor the complaints coming in, and we then go with the consultant or we go with the contractor who ends up saying, yes, I missed it, or they provide us with technology like GPS or video that give us that answer whether they serviced it or not. And if they didn't, we charge them a violation. So it's a really good communication with the hauler every day. We talk to them. We're constantly in communication to make sure they're providing that service. And if they're not, there's violations that go with it. A lot of haulers don't want to get those violations because it stays on their record. So in the past, we've even gone to the limits of actually having employees follow them just to make sure that they're providing that service. And we've done it, sporadically, just when we've had a lot of cases where we wanted to make sure that they're following through that contract. And that's the reason why we have that contract. It's a signed deal that they have to provide that service to our residents.
So the contract is, of course, the operating guidelines, and the liquidated damages and the live compliance checks you're talking about and the technology checks are all geared towards ensuring that our residents are receiving the timely service that they're paying for. And while it's not perfect, at times there are provisions, what you're saying, to make sure that we can audit and continue to ensure that we are getting the best service provided. So this next question also sort of tails into that. It says, are there consequences for the trash company when they throw our recycling in the same truck as the trash? Also, what is the preferred direction of the solid waste program here in the city of Palm Coast that the administration is looking to head?
So commingling trash and recycling is a big topic. It's something that is a violation if caught. One of the things that we have been in communication with Waste Pro, and we've also asked them for video, which we've provided from the truck, is that what's happening is when we have a recycling truck and we have a garbage truck. They're both the same style truck. So a lot of people get to that confusion that if they see a certain truck, it's automatically garbage. Not the case. So when a trash collection is done and there's recycling with it, one of the things that happens is the guy will look in the recycling bin and see if it's contaminated. Contamination is very hard with these days of people not realizing what's contaminated and what's not. For example, a peanut butter jar, or a peanut butter plastic jar, you don't completely clean it out and you throw it in there, it's contaminated. So one of the things the haulers are doing is if they see it's contaminated, they know that it has to go to the landfill, so they'll dump it. One of the things that we're working with them on is, like Allison said, maybe tag it and educate the resident on why was that bin contaminated? What was in it? Let's educate the resident. So we're working on that concept with the provider right now, because we do not want, them to be combining them. We want to recycle. We're a recycle city. We're green. We want to be green. But it's important that the residents understand what is, recyclable and what's not. So a lot of the new contract, we're going to be doing a lot of new education programs on that.
Yeah, and I'll just add that state law is now requiring that local governments include those kinds of stipulations in the contracts. So you're absolutely right that in the next contract, it'll be part of the contract to have some of those outreach efforts and even the tagging for contamination.
I think the second part of that question, Cynthia, was does the city have a direction they're looking to head? And I could take that answer and just say, no. I mean, I think from the highest level, what we want to ensure as a city is that our residents are getting the service they are asking for, the service they demand. They're getting it, in a timely and competent fashion. And also, obviously, I think everyone's aware of cost and price, and everyone I think would want to keep that cost and price, as low as possible for the level of service we want. So, and that's the bigger point of this town hall. That's the bigger point of the solid waste survey. We really want to hear from you, our residents, and get an understanding of what service you would like and what options may or may not be available, what things you might consider if they did have an effect on reducing price, and then understanding what things are just important to us as a community as we move forward in a new waste contract. So again, we appreciate you taking the time. 9,000 of us have already filled that survey out, and there's still time till the end of the month. We'd love for you to take that solid waste survey. If you haven't, that information is so helpful in us understanding what our community wants. So another question we received, Cynthia, is the questions regarding pricing and pickup frequency are if they're stemming from the recycling industry increases in cost. Has anyone actually checked to confirm that recyclable items are in fact being recycled and that we're not just paying for an extra service that isn't happening?
Absolutely. We are in communication with Waste Pro a lot, and they're using the same method they have in the last 5 years. They collect all the recyclables, and they have an Ormond Beach has a transfer station. They empty it, and anything recyclable goes to the Ocala facility that they sort and they sell off. We've actually, Mr. Morton and I have actually toured the Ocala site. And it's a very interesting site that they sort it. You see the packed areas that are going to be sold off. So they are recycling. It's in the contract and they're doing it. I mean, last month alone, they picked up 419.20 tons of recycling materials just from the city of Palm Coast. So they're doing it.
All right, another question for you, Cynthia. Since homeowners are charged twice a week for trash collection, since homeowners are paid for 2 times a week trash collection, again, that base rate that we pay monthly is about, would you give us the rate again? It's $20 and
36 cents.
So you pay $20.36 once a month. But since we're charged and that fee includes currently twice a week trash pickup, should we be entitled to a refund for all of the days missed?
So what we strive, unfortunately, we wish we could, but we couldn't. It's one of those things that, Waste Pro, we're providing them however many accounts we have, we're giving them that money each month. So if they miss a section, we strive to make sure they go back there immediately or within 24 hours to go out there and pick it up. So if you call us, immediately, we have regulations, like I said, with the liquidated damages. If you call before 5 o'clock, they have till 12 o'clock the next day to pick that missed pile up. So we want to get that service, but if they're missing, call customer service, our telephone numbers, or do a Palm Coast Connect case, both. We'll get it immediately and get them back out there. Our main number is 386-986-2360. So you can call customer service at any time.
What you're telling us is the penalty is not a refund to the customer. The penalty could be a fine that is collected by the city, but the resident will in fact have that garbage collected and picked up. So the service may be delayed, but not missed.
Exactly.
So moving into the next section, we have some recycling questions that we have. Why don't residents have recycling containers with lids? And I can answer that question. And it's as simple as when the last contract process was conducted, that issue just wasn't analyzed or explored at that time. Frankly, it's a great idea. It's something that we are going, after receiving that question from our resident, we're going to explore. We're going to look at and see what options we have for recycling containers with lids, and if that's possible. I think part of that question from some of the background I had heard, not directly asked, in respect to the lid question was that on windy days or stormy days, sometimes recycling can blow out. So would that help in the collection, and would it help residents not have to go pick up recycling out of the yard on windy days? So again, great question, and we really appreciate it. Allison, I think the next question probably falls squarely in something you can help us understand. What kind of plastics get recycled? And we've heard various answers from none, It all depends on the current market supply and demand. And as you mentioned, may even depend on the cleanliness of the plastic. So can you explain to us a little bit about plastics recycling?
Sure. And that is a really good question and a very common one. When it comes to plastics, there are 7 different plastic resin types. So what that really means is that each of those different resin types have different properties, like they melt at different temperatures or they have different durability or flexibility. If you think of the differences just within your home, that a PVC pipe under your sink is much more durable than the water bottle that you might drink from. Those are 2 different resin types of materials. So because those plastic materials are 7 different resin types, in order to recycle them back into a new product, they've got to be sorted out by resin type. And it's what is true is that the number 1s and number 2s of plastics are the most common, what we refer to as single-use items. So water bottles and soda bottles, for example, are the number 1 type plastic. Laundry bottles and milk jugs are the number 2 type plastic. The PVC pipe I mentioned, that happens to be the number 3 type plastic, and all the other resins tend to not be used as often in those single-use kind of items. So what I think is generally true is that the 1s and 2s are the most commonly recycled because there are more of them that we all can put in our recycling containers. That it's something that we used once and now we can recycle it. So those markets are more developed, and so there are better pricing when you sort out the 1s and the 2s from the other types of plastics. I think too, this kind of came up a few times when it comes to contamination, which is a big challenge for the processor. Another challenge for the processor is pulling out each of those specific different resin types for plastic. So what is common with the processor is that they will sort out all the number 1s they can and bale that together. So that happens to be called PET. So there'll be a PET bale, and then they'll also sort out all of the number 2s and bale those all together. And then they oftentimes do what they call a mixed bale. That would be the 3 through 7s, or the things that weren't sorted out by resin type. So there are markets for those mixed bales, but it's not as developed as the 1s and 2s. It's not as valuable. When it comes to items like PVC pipes, for example, there are efforts to recycle PVC, but it isn't something you would put in your curbside program. So the kinds of plastics that can be recycled is any type of plastic, but the ones that actually are from the curbside program is often the 1s and 2s are the most valuable, and then all the rest of the plastics would be mixed together. But I want to stress again here that it's important to pay attention to what's actually in your curbside program. So, every city could have different items, slightly different items on their curbside program, but that's often dictated by what the processor can actually sort out and market. So this is one more reminder that we want to get contamination out of all recyclables, including plastics, but plastics really are getting recycled. It may not all be coming from those curbside programs, though. Hopefully that was helpful.
That was really helpful, and kind of a tie into that.
Yeah.
With the recycling industry challenges that we're seeing across the country, it's a great question we got from our residents. It's a simple one, but very powerful. How are other cities addressing their recycling programs, and what do we think we can learn from that?
Right. And I think, the good news is that most cities are continuing to offer curbside recycling. I mentioned in the presentation that every community in the US is dealing with what's happening in the recycling markets, and meaning the revenues that they're getting from the recycling programs aren't as high, or in some cases non-existent. And that makes it more costly to continue to offer it. But in communities that do customer surveys, or they just hear from customers that they don't want to stop recycling, these curbside programs, the curbside recycling programs really started coming online in the late 80s and early 90s. So for a long time, we've all been used to putting our recyclables out, and that's kind of tough to go back and say, okay, never mind, even though we are at a tough moment for the recycling market. So I want to reiterate that the recycling markets are very volatile. They do go up, they do go down. It does seem like they're on the way back up. Most communities have continued to offer it. Some communities have slightly tweaked what they allow in the program. For example, there are some communities that have dropped glass from the curbside program. They may make some tweaks to what items can be put in the recycling container. And again, that relates to what the processor is actually able to process, bale it up and get it to the market. So another reminder that it's really important to pay attention to what's actually in your program to make sure you're putting the right items in the curbside program. But very few communities have dropped it. There are a few that have just dropped their curbside recycling, but not many.
You can go to
Outstanding.
the website and just type in the search engine recycling to see what's on our list of what they accept.
Excellent. Thanks, Cynthia. And then Cynthia, another great question. Is there any recent reports? Do we have a report that tells us what percentage of waste is currently recycled from our community?
So currently, the hauler provides us with monthly tonnage. They'll send us, what our waste, solid waste, our yard, and recycling tonnage each month is. So, just to kind of give you an example, the month of December, we took about 5,109.67 tons total. And out of that, 595.47 tons were recyclable. So about 12%. And then you take away the yard debris, which is about 679.13, and that's another 13%. So, that's about 25% that we're diverting from the landfill. So, we are doing the calculations. They are recycling. So we can, that's always something that we have on file as showing proof that they are.
Excellent.
Cynthia, it may be a good idea to add this to some of the education and outreach in the next contract, that to kind of let residents know, here's what the results are for what your efforts to put everything, separate out your recyclables at the curb. It could be a good idea to make it more publicly available to get these kind of tonnage reports.
Yeah, we're actually redoing the whole website, and I think we're going to have a new area for just that. So it'll be nice to show it.
So this question from a resident is, why is the 10% franchise fee the city receives not passed on to the customer in the form of savings? And the answer is, it essentially is that the franchise fee by state statute goes into the general fund and is put towards road maintenance. And so that franchise fee that we're receiving from the waste hauler is then, a lot of our road funding, if you understand the budget, when we have shortfalls in the gas tax, which always continually seems to be declining, especially as vehicles become more fuel efficient and as we see the onboarding of more and more electric vehicles through the COVID pandemic, it appeared that people maybe filled up or drove less. So that money is placed and used towards maintaining our road network in the city. So I believe there's a value add back, but that's where that money goes at this point. Another very important set of questions, I think this is always on folks' mind when we talk about discussing bidding and procurement of a waste hauling contract. There's a lot of perception in the public. There's a lot of reality about what these contracts look like. So our next series of questions from residents, we're all sort of linked together, and I think I'll read them together. And now, Allison, if you could address these, so this is really your field of expertise and your firm's field of expertise. So I'll read the 4 questions together. Are there other companies with better track records than Waste Pro that will be considered? If we're debating renewing the contract with Waste Pro, what other options are available to us as a community? Are there no other companies you can get bids from to ensure we are getting the best service for the best price? And then the last question, why don't we follow a procedure and go out to bid and let them bid along with anyone else for the job?
Yep, so all very good questions, and the answer is that we will follow the procedure to go out to bid. So we are working on a competitive procurement process at this time. We started with the outreach. So I want to remind everyone that responding to the residential customer survey is really important. We started there, as Mr. Morton explained earlier, that we want to hear from the residents to make sure that we're reflecting the wishes of the community in this next contract, but it will be a competitive procurement process. So that means that any hauler that meets our minimum qualifications would be able to submit a proposal. And we can kind of look at their track record. I think Cynthia mentioned earlier about the violations. We will ask questions about, from each hauler, what their track record has been. We'll also do reference checks and look at their qualifications. So it won't just necessarily be low price. I know these questions are about getting bids, but it will be a proposal that we'll seek from them where we'll put in some minimum standards. Also put in the requirements in the contract, like the new state law requirements, but we'll really lay out for the proposers, here's the scope of work, Here's what liquidated damages can be assessed and for what reasons. Here's how we'll work with the city to educate and do the outreach and potentially tagging containers. We'll put all of those specifications into the procurement package so that every hauler that meets those qualifications can submit a proposal and be considered. I do want to stress, though, that we want to make sure that we get the best value for the city. And so that's why I want to kind of reiterate that we want quality, and then price will be a consideration as well, but it will be balanced with the kind of the quality of service along with the price for service. And again, that way the city can ensure that we're getting the best value for the services moving forward into the next contract.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And the last segment of questions we have relate to new contracts. So they're all kind of related to what we're doing moving forward with a new contract. Cynthia, the first one probably would be best answered by you. What are you going to do, I'm assuming in the city, to ensure we receive the services we pay for under the new contract?
So just like we do right now, we are constantly monitoring the services being provided. I don't see that being changed in the new contract. One of the things that we have strived for in the last few years is really getting on to them if they're missing an area and communicating. And also dishing out that notification out to residents to give a heads up if, something did happen. Things happen, they have, the other day they had 8 people call out, people get sick, COVID happened, so we want to just be able to communicate with the residents to make sure they're going to get followed up if they did miss that area. So one of the things that we've strived is to use technology. Technology has been huge with their trucks. I mean, they have cameras on their trucks that, we have a certain time frame that we can pull the cameras to see if something happened. Or if they missed an area. They're constantly giving me GPS. A lot of residents, not a lot, some residents will call and say they missed my pickup. One of the things that we'll ask them is, what time did you put it out? That we have to have it out by 6 a.m. Oh, well, I put it out at 10 o'clock and they usually come at 10 o'clock. Well, it could be a different driver. They can be on the roads at 6 a.m. So those are type of things that, we will get with, we do more educating on the residents of the contract requirements so that we don't have to follow trucks. And, we can use that GPS or video to kind of leverage our fines and how we go about it.
Excellent. So another question we got from resident is, I'd like to know why we're even entertaining changing trash pickup. And I can answer that question to say, essentially, our contract with our waste hauler expires in May 2022. And so pursuant to our purchasing policies, we need to go out for a bid. The city isn't necessarily wanting to change, alter, or even reduce services. But since we're going out to a bid, it's a great time to evaluate options. Again, to hear from you, our residents, to see what you would like to see in terms of service delivery and where maybe some of those service deliveries or pricing points are important to you. So a competitive bid is always a great process to go out, to look at options, to test the marketplace, to reevaluate or to evaluate that we're getting a good deal. And again, it's a great check-in point for us to listen to the residents and try to determine where we're headed. So it's happening by necessity. And as a city, we're trying to make sure that we do the best job we can for our community as we go out to bid on this new contract. Cynthia, you got another great question. Can we move to a trash pickup system that the homeowner chooses and not the city, since we are having so many problems with the current service? Wouldn't it just be easier to cancel and get a new service?
So canceling a service is a lot more than most people think. So, one of the things that we do as a city is we want to get the best price for the community as a whole. We also don't feel like we want to be more efficient with routes, efficiency of pickups and collection and, service level. And by picking and choosing who to pick up and having all these different haulers on the road, like we want to be able to provide the community with consistency as far as having one hauler, getting one price. We don't want to be able to have everybody have different prices and so forth. And one of the things that has helped us, even with the code side, is that, Waste Pro is not picking up who they want to. They're not picking and choosing who they pick up. So if you didn't pay, they're not skipping over you. They're picking up everybody, and I think that as a community, we would want that. You know, we don't want garbage left out. And, you know, I think it reduces our code issues. It makes Palm Coast what it is today. You know, it's a beautiful community. So I think that it's a better overall city as a whole, making it better on having it a monthly bill and a contract for everybody.
And Cynthia, I'd like to add to that too, that it also minimizes how much of those heavy trucks are coming down residential streets. So if you change the system where every resident can select their own, in theory, you could have multiple different haulers coming down the same street. So even just from a public safety standpoint, having one hauler that covers the whole city is helpful in that way too.
Agree.
Great, and thanks for, I think that's great information. You know, I never thought of it that way, but if you had 4 or 5, you know, vendors on a street all coming at different times of the day or different hours of the day or different days of the week, you know, that could be problematic.
And it's typically more expensive because they don't have those economies of scale where they know they're picking up every house. So I agree with everything you and Cynthia both just said.
Another great question, Allison, I think this is for you, since we're talking about something we consider in the new contract. Could we move to having more recycling pickup? We are filling 2 bins a week, sometimes more. Could there also be information sent out to us as to what we can and can't recycle in our curbside service? And more importantly, where we can take those items that could be recycled, but just not in our curbside service? Those are great questions.
Yes, very good question, both parts of it. And I think on the education and outreach, you know, we've touched on that in the presentation and some of these other questions, but I want to reiterate that getting the information out there is really important. I think Cynthia mentioned that the website is being revamped so that we can make it very easy for residents to identify what materials should be in their curbside program. It may also be worth considering providing some locations for items that aren't in the program, though that's usually kind of outside of a city's purview, but maybe just some helpful information that, you know, if you had certain electronics, there may be take back programs or something for electronics. So getting that information out there is really important. I love hearing that you're filling 2 bins a week, sometimes more. And I want to take this minute here to replug the customer survey, because some of the questions that we have in the survey are around frequency of pickup and style of pickup. So if you remember what those city provided wheeled containers, also known as carts, the images that we showed in the presentation, if you did switch to cart collection for recycling, you know, that's a much bigger container than the 18-gallon bins that are currently used. So it would give you more room to have more recyclables in there. So I'm going to shamelessly plug the survey again. Please take the time to answer the survey, because that'll help the city making these decisions about even if those, you know, those carts have lids on them too. I know we had a question earlier about the bins that are open, so when the wind blows, you know, those recyclables can blow around. So kind of 2 parts to this. Please do answer the survey because it helps us know what scope to put in the next contract. But yes, there is opportunity for larger containers or changing the frequency of collection. And there will absolutely be a big emphasis on getting the education material out to the residents.
And last question we're getting today, Allison, if you could answer this. Does the administration foresee an increase in the cost of solid waste collection here in Palm Coast? I think people are wondering if we can sort of foresee the future a little bit, and do we know if a cost increase is coming?
I wish I had that crystal ball, but the truth is we don't know at this point. But I want to reiterate that the procurement process is a competitive process. So when these haulers are competing against each other, they know that price is one of the determining factors. So taking us through this procurement process is a good way to make sure that you are getting, you know, the best deal that you can for the services that you want to provide. So while we can't guarantee what's going to happen with prices in this next procurement process, at least it's a method that is fair, and we can get those bids in from multiple haulers, and they know they're competing against each other in this process, which gives them an incentive to sharpen their pencils, if you will. So can't guarantee it, but we're going to do what we can to make sure we get, again, the best value for the city.
Outstanding. So, you know, again, really appreciate your time today, Allison, Cynthia. More importantly, thank you to all our residents who spent this time with us today to go through this virtual town hall on waste collection, garbage, and recycling. Again, plugging, as you did, the survey, just how important it is. I think that's part of what makes Palm Coast so extraordinary, is that our residents are so engaged in our processes. They're willing, you've been willing, residents, to give us the feedback, to have discussions, to submit questions, to continue to ask great questions that help inform us and help complement the process. So we're very grateful for all the feedback we've gotten, and again for you doing the survey. Over 9,000 so far. We'd love to have more. We have a few more weeks, so please get on either Palm Coast Connect and fill out that survey, or if you keep your eye in your utility bill in the mail, should be an opportunity to complete it that way as well. Just as importantly, the residents of this, the results, of this survey will be brought and presented to the council at a workshop on April 13th. So hopefully you'll tune into that workshop as well. I know we'll wind up publishing those results in some capacity for everyone to take a look at. But those results will be reviewed and compiled, and we'll have a productive discussion with those on the 13th. So again, Cynthia, Allison, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. And thank you again to our residents for taking the time to participate with us today.